I'm Ruth McDermott. Designed the Fitpacks in the early 90s with my then business partner Steve Ward. We had a fairly close relationship with the AIDS Bureau. You know, we're in touch with them a lot. They wanted a series of packs for clean and used syringes. There was to be a 3-pack, a 5-pack and a 10-pack. And they had sort of certain criteria for them. First of all, when the client would go to the needle exchange, they would get this pack, would have 3 or 5 or 10, depending on the size, clean syringes in it. Then they'd take it away and, you know, would get used. Once they'd used them, they needed to be able to put them back into that same pack. But when they were put back as used, they needed to be tamper-proof. So if the pack was discarded on the street or anywhere, the needle couldn't fall out. In fact, that was one of the reasons that the actual project came about, because needles were being discarded on the street, and that was a problem for, you know, just ordinary people walking around, kids, needle stick injuries and so on. And so they felt they had to do something. I mean, I was really surprised the government funded, because really, you know, a lot of the clients were involved with sort of perhaps stuff that wasn't, you know, legal, and it was a very new thing to actually kind of fund something that in a way was illegal, you know. So there was a sort of a bit of an odd conundrum there. So they were very concerned that it looked like an anonymous, easy to use thing, because they really had to encourage the clients to use it. I actually should say that the compact nature was very important. When we brought concepts or models to the AIDS Bureau, they would say, "Can you make it smaller?" You know, we constantly had this sort of refrain. They had to be easy to carry and easy to use. You couldn't have sort of obscure instructions or something. It had to be sort of fairly straightforward. And then once at the end, the idea was to encourage the clients to bring them back to the needle exchange, and then they would be incinerated. IV drug users come from a wide range of backgrounds. They could be people on the bus with a job, or they could be perhaps someone in a more difficult position. So they need to have their privacy respected. And if they felt that they were going to be stigmatised by being seen with this product, it wouldn't work, because it really was important that they embraced this idea of needle exchange. It was only going to work if everybody did it. We had to get the amount of needles lying around the place down. We had to get people going back to exchanges and things, getting clean needles. It was very important that it didn't look like a medical product. That was absolutely key, and they actually rejected a design that had a sort of a very obvious sort of 5 sort of tubular shapes on the outside, because they said, look, it just looks too odd. People will, if somebody took that out of their handbag, people would go, what's that? Whereas if they just took a plain black box, it could be a pen box, it could be just some product packaging, it could be anything. So it wouldn't get noticed. So, you know, the slick black boxes and the way they're matte and all that is not because we were trying to make some sort of designer statement. It was actually quite the opposite. The syringes had to be hidden. It was very important, and because otherwise people wouldn't use them. They had a selling job not only on the wider community and politicians, but they also had to sell the client community that this was a good idea, and they weren't going to get, you know, nabbed for having these black boxes. That was very important. Yeah, what we learned from the AIDS Bureau people was that part of it was that wider thing of, you know, needle stick injuries, but there was also this whole thing about encouraging a relationship with the clients. If they kept coming back to the needle exchange regularly, then a relationship could develop between the you know, out workers, as I call them, and the clients. And, you know, if there was any opportunity to assist them or chat about things and so on. But they're not going to come in, it's not this sort of do-gooder thing where they just sort of turn up and they get cured. It's actually more of an ongoing process, and they felt this was a very important part. And then you could talk about education and safe sex messages and things like that.